Good afternoon, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's noon, so thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about succeeding on the LSAT, and we will go through some slides, and at the end, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So please hold your questions till then, but we will take time at the end to ask, to go through some questions. So my name is Ian McInnes. I'm the Director of Admissions here at Michigan State University College of Law. I've been here for a little over a year, but been in law school admissions for almost the past 6 years. I am from Florida, received my undergraduate degree from the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. I was a financial service major, and then I attended Valparaiso University School of Law in Valparaiso, Indiana for law school. And graduated in 2012, went back to Florida, licensed in Florida since 2012 to practice there. So been in your seat at one point, probably about 10 years ago. So I know what you're going through. The great thing is that with some changes to how many times you can take the LSAT now and some other things that they're going to be doing in the future, it's a little bit easier, I would say, to be able to take the test in a timely fashion and still make sure you're happy with your score and get your application in on time or early, right? So we will go through some agenda items here. How is the LSAT used in law school admissions? What's the LSAT all about? How to study, and then we'll go to questions, like I said. So the LSAT in law school admissions. So the LSAT is basically used as a comparison tool. It's a standardized measure. It's used to gauge your academic potential in law school, and then has also been widely known not only to do that, gauge how you're going to do your first year is typically what it gauges, but also how you're going to do on the bar exam. So it is widely used and known to be a good predictor of both. So that is why most law schools still use it. There are those few now that are accepting the GRE. I think as far as law schools are concerned, we're up to maybe 20 to 25 law schools that will accept the GRE in lieu of the LSAT. But again, there are roughly 203 ABA accredited law schools. So a good vast majority of schools are still requiring the LSAT. The other thing to note is that, as far as the LSAT is concerned, each law school has its own competitive pool. And it says aim for the 75th percentile. I typically tell students that your goal is to hit medians or above. So whatever the school's median is, that's just, and above that, obviously, going past the 75th percentile is just going to put you in the best possible position to be a competitive applicant. As far as the contents of the LSAT, there are 5 sections, right? And so you're looking at logical reasoning questions, and then analytical reasoning. So there are 2 sections of logical reasoning, analytical reasoning, reading comprehension, and then there's an ungraded writing sample. What I will say about the ungraded writing sample is that most schools do still read that. So please, when you're taking the LSAT, take that seriously, even though it's ungraded. I have read those writing samples before where students basically will write whatever they want to write about, and they're not answering the prompts, and that does not look good to law school admissions professionals, because then we question your judgment and whether you're taking things seriously, and law school is not the place to be if you are not taking things seriously. So that's a little bit about the LSAT. A couple of updates as far as the LSAT is concerned. If you haven't heard, starting in the fall of 2019, the LSAT is now going to be offered 9 times a year, and it's going totally digital. So it's not going to be paper and pencil anymore. It will be on tablets, and you'll still be at a test center, and there'll still be proctors and things like that, but it will be on a tablet, so it will be digital, and they're going from 6 times a year, which is what we're up to now, to 9 times a year. So more opportunity to take the test, and like I said, still be able to get your application in early enough, which I always tell the students applying to Michigan State that early is any time before January 1st of the year you're looking to start law school. So if you're looking to start law school in the fall of 2020, you want to try and have your applications in anytime in the fall of 2019 after applications open. It just puts you in the best possible position for timely decision and scholarship, because as we move into the spring and classes start to fill up and scholarship dollars start to dwindle, and even if you're a very strong competitive student, if there aren't seats available or there's no money left, that puts us in a hard position as far as making sure that we can admit you and admit you with some money. So things to keep in mind. It really is all about planning. Now the next couple of slides, I'm just going to sort of take my time and let y'all read through these. These are just some sample questions as far as analytical reasoning, logical reasoning, and reading comprehension, just to give you an idea of what those look like. So this is a sample of the analytical reasoning question. Pretty short statement with some different things that they're looking for, and then they're going to ask you questions. So this one is something that you basically are going to have to lay out in probably some pencil and paper. And I haven't heard, but I would assume that they are going to allow you or give you some scratch paper when the test goes totally digital, just so you have an opportunity to sketch out things like a question like this, or even maybe logic games, the same kind of thing. It is nice to sort of sketch things out to try and find the answer as quickly as possible. And this question came directly from LSAT's website. They have sample questions there with explanations as to why the answer is the answer. So it's definitely a good place to start if you're just starting the process of studying or figuring out what kind of questions are on the LSAT. The next question is a sample logical reasoning question. Again, remember that this is these kinds of questions are split into 2 different sections. Most students do not like the logical reasoning questions. It is, I would say, one of the sections that I disliked the most when I took the LSAT, and I think that's pretty common for most students or applicants who are taking the LSAT. So that's why studying is important, because there are techniques that can be pointed out, right, as far as figuring out the answer to some of these logical reasoning questions. And you might not exactly know why the answer is what it is, but through those techniques and tips that they offer, you're able to figure it out without maybe knowing exactly why the answer is the answer. So definitely studying is something. This next one is a reading comprehension question. Basically, with reading comprehension questions, you're going to get a passage that's anywhere from 3 to 4 paragraphs long, and then they're going to ask you a series of questions. So I didn't put the passage in here, but it's pretty basic reading comprehension as far as reading the passage and then answering the questions that follow based on the reading. So pretty straightforward when it comes to the reading comprehension section. All right, how to study for the LSAT. So, the biggest piece of advice that I typically give students is do as many practice problems and practice tests under timed conditions as you can do. Because typically what gets students on the LSAT is the timing. It's 35 minutes a section. That 35 minutes goes quite quick especially if you're trying to answer questions after reading 3 to 4 paragraphs in a reading comprehension section, or in the analytical reasoning, if you recall, trying to sketch out so you can try and find out the correct answer, that is going to take time up. So trying to condition yourself to the timing will sometimes help reduce the stress and anxiety on the day of the test. It won't eliminate it, but it definitely can help. So that's the biggest piece of advice. Now, there are plenty of study materials that you can buy online. LSAT has study materials online that you can buy. There are, the bookstores have whole sections dedicated to LSAT test prep books. And then you have your commercial test prep companies like Princeton Review, Kaplan, PowerScore. There's a whole host of them. So I always tell students, do what works best for you, right? If you need the structure of a commercial test prep company, look into a commercial test prep company. If you are good about setting up, a study plan and structuring it yourself, then get a bunch of books and do as many practice problems and practice tests as you can do, to basically study and prepare. The other thing is now that LSAC, in partnership with Khan Academy, is offering LSAT test prep free. So that is another, whether you still want to do a commercial test prep company or you want to study on your own, I've been encouraging students to register with Khan Academy because it's basically just another tool in your back pocket. And the students that, they've only been doing this since June, but the students I've talked to who have used Khan Academy to study for the LSAT have basically told me that they feel much better walking into the test after having used Khan Academy than they did prior. So, and again, those students are coming from a background of different methods as far as studying, whether it's commercial test prep, studying on their own. There is a video here in the slide that I'm going to try and play, just so you can get a general idea of how the test prep through Khan Academy is set up. So hopefully you're able to hear that. If not, it is on LSAC's website, and you can go there to register. And like I said, I think it's definitely something that is beneficial and at least another tool in your back pocket when studying. So let's see if I can play this brief overview of how the test prep is set up through Khan Academy.
Welcome to Khan Academy official LSAT. My name is Aisha, and I'm the product manager. Khan Academy teams up with the LSAT to provide free and official tests that will support you. We'll help you reach your LSAT goal. First, we'll diagnose your strengths. You'll take a very short test or a focus test. We'll identify the skills you should focus on first to improve your LSAT score. Second, you'll receive a personalized score. So a practice plan based on where you're trying to reach, your practice schedule, and your strengths and weaknesses. Third, we'll encourage you to practice by giving you access to thousands of questions, full-length exams, and hours of videos, articles, and explanations covering every single topic. Fourth and finally, we'll help you track your progress towards your goals. As weaknesses turn into strengths, you'll see your test scores rise. And throughout it all, we'll check in on a regular basis to see if they enter. Please visit us at khanacademy.org/LSAT to learn more about our Khan Academy official LSAT.
All right, so like I said, I think it's definitely beneficial, another tool to have in your back pocket. And as far as, they're talking about setting up a study plan based on the score you want to achieve, I will tell you that most students spend anywhere on average from 10 to 14 weeks studying for the LSAT. And again, that's not every day you're studying for hours on end. I would say average hour or two. So it is something, as we're going through the tips here, that it definitely is a marathon, right? Studying is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And studying in a group can be detrimental, right? Because you process and learn differently sometimes than others in a group. Now, there are certain things where you might talk it out with a friend or two, but again, these tips from the pros say studying in a group can be detrimental. And at least for me, that was something that studying in a group, even in law school, did not work for me. So how you learn best, how you study best, so sort of stick with that, right? But you're definitely going to have to put the time and effort in to realize the score that you really want. Don't just practice, analyze what led you to the wrong answer, right? So it's really easy for us we get an answer wrong, and we look at the answer and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then move on. But really try to analyze why the answer is what it is, and what led you to choosing the wrong answer, right? Sharpen your critical thinking in class. So really, when you're taking classes, if you're still an undergrad, or even if you're in a professional setting, really stop and think about how you answer the way you answer, because again, a lot of the LSAT is critical thinking, but so is law school. Law school is about critical thinking, reasoning, research and writing and analysis. So the goal is, to try and sharpen those tools now, and then continue to sharpen them when you get to law school. Be sure to play games before the test. Again, this is, mainly talking about logic games, but also you don't want to, most students, I think it doesn't help, right, if you're cramming the day before, right? So you really want to have that plan where you're trying to decompress the day before, because the goal is to go into the LSAT with a clear mind and as less stress as possible, because that's going to help you analyze and use your critical thinking to answer the questions as best as possible. Answer everything. There are no points deducted for wrong answers. So if you're starting to run out of time, make sure that you try to answer all the questions, whether you're guessing or not, because it's better to guess and hopefully through the guessing game, get the answer correct and get some points, rather than leave it blank and have no chance at getting any kind of points. And then know where to find the easier questions. So again, I think as you're reading through, sometimes it helps to skim the types of questions that you have in each section before you start answering them, because there might be some that jump out to you and you can answer quickly, and then you can use the rest of your time to answer the questions that are a little bit harder and might take you more time, so that therefore, hopefully, you're getting the ones you can answer quickly correct, and then the ones that are going to take you longer that you might not get correct in the long run, you have some more time to be able to answer those. So just some tips to think about. The biggest key takeaway, like I said, is plan ahead and study, study, study. So most students are taking the LSAT for the first time between the summer between their junior and senior year. Now, that used to be the general rule, because the test was only offered 4 times a year up until this year, which now we're to 6. But like I said, for anybody who isn't looking at applying this year to law school and they're looking down the road to 2020, it's going to be offered 9 times a year starting next fall. So that pretty much gives you almost every month a test that you could take if you weren't happy with your score or you're taking it for the first time. But again, your goal is to try and have an application ready to go in that fall or prior to the January 1 date, right? Like I said earlier, and having it in the fall instead of waiting to the spring of the year you're looking to start law school. So plan ahead and study, study, study. There's some, if you're interested, obviously, most of you, I would hope, that are on this webinar are interested in MSU Law. But if you have further questions, right, or want to talk about the application process or MSU Law, you can request a 20-minute phone consultation. They go longer, that's totally fine. We don't cut you off at 20 minutes, but you can do it via our website or our web address, email, and then or call in to set something up. The other thing is we do have some upcoming webinars moving forward. Indigenous Law program here at MSU Law. There's going to be a panel of current students in November, and then we'll talk about writing your personal statement on the 13th. Financing your legal education will be on the 15th. Our IP program here at MSU Law will be on the 20th. And then practicing internationally, we have a dual degree program with the University of Ottawa. And then also for those students who are foreign trained attorneys, we do have an advanced standing JD program. So those are just some upcoming webinars. We'll have more in the spring. So keep an eye on our website and make sure to register for any that interest you. At this time, I'm going to go to the Q&A section. It looks like maybe somebody's already asked one question. So yes, so as far as sharing our median LSAT for the 2018 incoming class, our median was a 154, 25th percentile was at a 152, 75th percentile was at a 157. And so that sort of gives you that range. Now, again, remember, we do a truly holistic review. I always tell students LSAT and undergrad GPA are important, but the rest of your application is just as important as those two things. So as far as the LSAT and undergrad GPA are concerned, but 154 was our median for this past incoming class. So I hope that helps. Other questions? All right, so how does MSU consider older applicants when the GPA is quite dated? So again, we're looking holistically at a file. So if the GPA, if somebody's been out of school for 10, 15, 20 years or more, we obviously are going to look at the GPA, but then we're also going to look and see what you've done since being out of school. And so then that's when your resume comes into consideration. Whatever you might talk about in your personal statement of things you've been doing, since you graduated from undergrad. Those are all things that we then take into account. The other thing that I will say is, if anybody, whether they're older applicants or not, if your LSAT score or your GPA, is a little bit lower than our median. So our median, or even 25th percentile, you're going to want to try and balance that out with a higher LSAT score. So our median GPA for this incoming class was a 352. The 25th percentile was at a 324, and the 75th percentile was at a 373. So again, gives you that 25th median and then 75th percentile. All right, all LSAT questions have the same value. Correct. So the LSAT, my understanding is yes. There are, the same amount of points are given to each question. The scoring is on a 120 to a 180 basis. So, my understanding is yes, all LSAT questions have the same value when it comes to the actual points that are given. As far as addenda, right, regarding anything, whether it's GPA or LSAT, I always say, especially with the GPA, if you have dips, right? But if you're trending pretty much the same as far as overall your GPA is concerned, it is totally okay, and you don't have to worry about, right, giving us an addenda. Or addenda. Addendums, right? If you're doing an addendum for a GPA, I typically say, like, if you are trending throughout undergrad at a 3.5, and then there's 1 year for some reason that you go down to like a 2.75 or somewhere in the twos, right? That's something you want to try and give us some context and background. Same thing with the LSAT. If you take it more than once, if your score increases or, God forbid, it decreases, right? I always say more than 5 points, you want to try and share with us through an addendum what exactly you think was happening at that time, why your score went up. Maybe you didn't have the time to study the first time, or maybe you were sick or something was going on. And the same thing if your score goes down the second time you take it. Giving us some kind of context is always helpful. Let's see. Will MSU law wait on my LSAT score if I apply next fall 2019 to start in fall 2020? So if you're applying, so the fall 2019 or the fall 2020 application will be available in August of 2019. If you haven't taken LSAT yet and you send your application in to us, we can't review it until we have an LSAT score on file. Now, if you have an LSAT score on file, but you're taking the test again and you've already applied to us, what's going to happen is we're going to review your file one time through. And if we decided that we wanted to wait until your new score came out to make a final decision on your file, we would hold your file until the new score came out. So you don't have to worry about being denied or waitlisted if you're taking a future test, but you want to make sure that you're telling us you're taking a future test, so we have that noted in your file. Otherwise, if we're going to make an offer with your current score, we'll do that. But I would say by and large, most students who are registered for a future test, we typically will put them on hold and wait for their new score. As far as scholarships are concerned, our scholarships are all merit-based, but I say that with a caveat, which is, yes, they're merit-based in the sense that they're a little more heavily tied to LSAT and undergrad GPA, but we are taking a holistic review when we're looking at files. So there are some students who don't have the LSAT and GPA, but there's something that jumps out at us with regards to their background, experiences they've had, those kinds of things through their resume or their personal statement. And so 98% of our incoming class this fall had some type of scholarship that was offered to them through the institution. We also have a running list. Our Director of Financial Aid keeps a running list of external scholarships that you can apply for outside of the law school. And I always encourage students to look at those scholarship opportunities, and if they meet the requirements, then to definitely submit those applications, because we hear a lot from those organizations that not many students actually take the time to apply, and therefore the likelihood of possibly receiving the scholarship, I think, is greater than what most students think. All right. As far as application fees, yes, if you registered for this webinar and in your registration you put that you're applying for the 2019 cycle, we will send you a fee waiver through email. So keep an eye out for that. If for some reason it doesn't come to you, then shoot me an email or the office an email and we can definitely get you one. For those of you who are applying for a future cycle like 2020, incoming class, or 2021, once that application opens in whatever year it is, so for 2020 in the fall of 2019, if you're looking to apply and you haven't gotten a application fee waiver from us yet, shoot us an email and we can definitely send you one. So that's something we're more than happy to do. Let's see. So in our application, if you're taking a future test, on our application it asks, the question is, when have you taken the LSAT and what was your score, and when will you be taking the LSAT? So what you would do is you put your past LSAT score down, and then with the date you took it, and then underneath that you'll put the future date that you're registered. So if you're registered to take the test in January, then you'll just put January 26th in that question. You'll leave, obviously, the score blank on the application, but then when we get the application, we'll see that you're registered for January. And so that's how we sort of catch that, and that's how you sort of flag it to us. Any other questions? Let's see. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, like I said, please feel free to reach out if anything comes up after the fact. You know, oh, let's see, one more thing. Will MSU Law accept old LSAT scores? So LSAT scores are only good for 5 years. So we receive from LSAC, the Law School Admissions Council, we receive any score that you've taken within the past 5 years. Anything outside of that, we do not receive and we would not consider. So if you've taken it within the last 5 years, it's going to show up on your Credential Assembly Service Report, which comes with your application through LSAC, but anything outside of that, we wouldn't accept or be able to see. How are graduate school grades factored into the application? So that is part of, yes, we look at graduate school grades and we take those into consideration as part of the holistic review. But it's nothing that we report. So basically, when we're doing reporting to the American Bar Association, they only ask for your undergrad GPA and your LSAT score, whereas as far as graduate school grades, those aren't sent to them, but we use them in the application process through our holistic review because how you did in grad school can give us some kind of insight into how you might be able to handle law school and the rigors of law school. So if you have graduate school grades, I definitely encourage you to make sure that we get those transcripts through LSAC so we can see them. Unless you really bombed your graduate school or your master's program, I typically tell students that graduate school grades aren't going to hurt you in the application process. I think it just, again, gives you some more, as part of the holistic review, it gives a little more depth to your file if you have that on file. It also helps if, you know, maybe you struggled in undergrad, but then we see that you did really, you know, well in grad school. It helps, you know, in our minds at least, sort of balance out a little bit lower undergrad GPA. All right. Are there any other questions? All right, doesn't look like it. But if you do have questions, like I said, moving forward, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is basically my last name, so MCINNIS, and then the initial of my first name, Ian, so it's MCINNISI@law.msu.edu. Otherwise, you can send email inquiries to admis@law.msu.edu. And those will either make their way to me or our assistant director or anybody else in the office who would be able to answer those questions. But I really appreciate everybody joining me this afternoon. I hope you found this helpful. Wish you much success during the application process and on taking the LSAT when you do so. And I look forward to seeing everybody's applications to MSU Law. All right, have a great rest of the day.